text. Tell them about the text.
The text, yeah. William Thompson. Something I was reluctant to release, but yes, William Thompson was gracious enough to send a text to me and to my wife, and he said that he apologized that his dishonesty had destroyed my career, and perhaps he could help to rebuild it. And it was a very personal moment. It was very touching. In the end, it was part of the story, and so it was released. But it didn't find its way into this because it wasn't part of the natural rhythm. This story wasn't about me. It didn't matter what happened to me. It wasn't about me. It was about William Thompson. So, but that will appear in due course. But it was for me and my wife, for the family, that was a special moment.
Can you tell us, I know Brian Hooker was with us in New York and wasn't able to make it here, but can you guys tell us what he's up to now as well, or let the audience know?
Yeah, Brian's back teaching at Simpson University in Northern California. He'll be joining us at the Manhattan Film Festival on the 24th in New York. And he's got a massive following on Facebook. He's a very, very popular man. He's something of a sex symbol in the autism community. We love Brian Hooker, and he did an extraordinary job. I'm going to finish on this because I've talked enough, but he asked for the reason why the paper was retracted. They sent it out for re-review. The paper had been selected on the criteria of, and this is from the journal itself, its scientific excellence. And then, under pressure, it was withdrawn. And when he asked why it had been withdrawn, they sent him the review which said that he had only, in his revised analysis, he had only reviewed one data set. He'd reviewed exactly the same data set that the CDC had published on. That was the reason. Where did they pull that one from? Absolutely extraordinary. So that is the reason. So anyway, when the media say Brian Hooker had his paper withdrawn, therefore he's totally discredited as a scientist, it's the journal that's discredited. But I'll leave it there.
Thank you. How about another question? Go way in the back.
Pressure on the government. You guys are knowledgeable which departments do. Can you put on your website, which departments or which people you guys contact with? As a layperson, I don't know who to contact.
Yes, and one thing I'll say is this, our website is being upgraded every week. So we're going to be at Tribeca. We're building websites. We're talking to Congress people. We're talking to someone they hadn't seen here. But we have, but what we really need right now is for everybody to just keep people in the theaters. I mean, what I want to say is your protests and the strength of this movement really relies on theatrics that are walking blindly into a vaccine choice without just doing the research. And so what I wanted to bring was my experience. It helps the message get out here is changing the world. And the website's going to get better. All of that is very important. We're not shirking our duty. We're trying to catch up with it. I really appreciate you all being here.
Yeah.
On and on. We have the answers here. That's the whole thing.
The answer to your original question is we don't have that, and as Dale says, we're putting that up. But if you go to John Gilmore's website, which is called autismactionnetwork.org, I think, .org, then there's a page on there. If you put in your zip code, it will tell you who your congressman is, and it will give you direct access to send a letter straight to that congressman. So autismactionnetwork.org.
And just on the theater front, in Phoenix coming up, Honolulu, San Diego, eventually Texas, and I think after this weekend, more and more theaters are going to see the.
There's some and that's when you put in the zip code, and it will tell you who your representative is in the local area. But I know that the DT. So now we side effects for these children.
Still here, but in fact, I want you to know that it's a quadrivalent vaccine. I think that's correct, because it was just too much. 5 million doses by the Japanese separated out into its component parts. We didn't see, as I say in the movie, do we have concerns led to the passage of the 1986 Vaccine Injury Compensation Act that shielded the manufacturers. So the more you go into this, the deeper you go down that hole, you realize that The safety studies for all of these vaccines are profound. Vaccinated versus unvaccinated. You know, one of the reasons,
What's the purpose?
and they reasoned that if they could happen, in own words by the CDC, Merck got their MMR, it became the vaccine of 2001. And therefore, if they had not committed fraud, we would know the answer to your question by now. And we don't.
Also, no follow-up, you know that as Black people, we've always been skeptical of the medical system and the CDC places like that. They did the
And your concerns and your American and Hispanic children using a high titer measles vaccine, which they knew had caused an excess mortality in developing countries. So it was the children were used as an experimental cohort to look at this vaccine. So there's certainly a racial connotation to this, a civil rights issue. The two groups in the film who were at particular risk were African American boys, and the other group at very high risk, irrespective of race, were children who were developmentally normal to 12 months of age. So when you look at that globally, that's a whole lot of children, any way you look at it. There will be reasons why African American boys are a particular risk, and had they been explored when they had these data, we would have that answer.
Okay. Yes, way in the back.
As a parent of two kids who've been vaccine injured, I want to express my profound gratitude to all of you sharing your story, Mr. Bigtree, Dr. Wakefield. We felt alone in this fight until we found this community, and it's empowered us. There is so much information out there, but thank you. Just a thank you. I have a nephew who has severe allergies. He's allergic to everything. If he comes into contact with meat on a countertop, you know, from somebody who's making bread, he could go into anaphylaxis. Do you think it's possible, given the rate of chronic illness in school children who are mainly vaccinated, 54%, do you think it's possible that this is a broader issue than just autism spectrum disorder? I know you addressed it a little bit in the film, but do you think it's possible that this could be contributing to the rate of childhood diabetes, MS, other ailments that just didn't exist? Leukemia?
I don't think it's a possibility. I think it's almost a certainty. And not because of my opinion, but because of the scientific literature that says so. For example, in the context of diabetes, Bart Klassen, who was a scientist, a physician working at the NIH, has shown categorically in a series of studies that in type 1 diabetes, insulin-dependent diabetes, associated in particular with the HIB, the HIV vaccine. So the hepatitis B vaccine was withdrawn in France when it was noted to be associated with multiple sclerosis in children, which is vanishingly rare. Yes, asthma, eczema, hay fever, all these epidemic diseases have at their core a derangement of the immune system, and clearly vaccines are designed, intended to, and do have a profound effect upon the developing immune system. So if you are looking for a candidate causal agent, then you really need look no further than that. I think there are a lot more data that will be emerging on this in the near future, particularly when we get some honest science out of this. But in the meantime, the answer to your question is yes.
And about the separating the MMR into 3 separate shots, as a doctor, do you think there's any concern for the increase in exposure of the adjuvants that are in there? Aluminum, mercury, all of that, arsenic, cadmium?
Yes, absolutely. Well, aluminum is a major neurotoxin. It's put into vaccines as an adjuvant, which is intended to boost the immune response. What it does, in fact, is to skew the immune response towards a hyperallergic response, away from an optimal antiviral response, and that has the potential for great harm. But aluminum should remain locked in the Earth's crust as aluminum silicate and never released in any shape, manner, or form. So what it's being what it's doing, being injected into the bodies of children, is it's insanity.
Thank you.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and then I want to give our guest some time to make some closing statements if they'd like to. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
Is there a way for somebody that would be willing to do the vax versus unvax study apart from the CDC? Finding vaccinated kids will not be difficult, and I personally have two that have not been vaccinated, and I could find thousands. Is there anybody that can and would do that study?
Yes, there is. I can't say too much about it because it's not my study, but a very, very large database is currently being examined quite independently of the authorities of the CDC, and hopefully there will be data emerging from that in the very near future. So it is being done. I can't say more about it now, but it's a study that, and the other thing to say is it should never, no vaccine safety study should ever be done by the CDC again.
If you guys want to.
Well, I just want to say one of the difficulties you have there, and I don't think that's the only vax versus unvax study ever done. But the problem you have is if it's not published in a medical journal, it's not realistic, or it's not real. When you have medical journals that have been comments by almost every publisher from journals don't really mean anything. They either get retracted or they never make it into. We're getting it from all sides. We have to fight. Really what we're fighting for is independent research, real independent research. We're not anti-vaccine. It really is the truth. If we can make safe, healthy vaccines for all children, fantastic. But we cannot get there if we don't have real testing, real studies. If we're not testing our vaccines going to babies as well as we're testing Viagra that's going into our grandparents, we have a real problem. That's a mistake. Why should we not break up the MMR and make that available? Does the medical establishment or the pharmaceutical industry get a free ride and I can't sue them when they're injuring my children? Possible death or autism. That's what's happening. Nero has made that happen. We're happy. I mean, it's not the, but.
Having a vaccine into a child and the person's taken it. You can tell me that there's a new vaccine.
Is actually the most from that does is to read. It's a tough lesson.